More on his remarkable life now from 7's Chris Clackham.
It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood.
The patron saint of children's television died early Thursday at his home in Pittsburgh.
Could you be mine?
Fred Rogers was Mr. Rogers to the millions of American children who visited his neighborhood daily for the 35 years PBS has broadcast the show. It's the longest-running program in PBS history. David Newell was a friend and colleague who played the role of Mr. McFeely.
He was the real deal. People always asked his wife, what's Fred like at home? And she would say, what you see is what you get.
An ordained minister, Fred Rogers turned to television early on, broadcasting his first show in the U.S. in 1968. He was the first on television to talk to children directly about the tough issues of love, divorce, death, and even war.
Well, I always say, I'll do everything that I can to keep you safe. And we love you, and you're welcome to talk with us about anything.
Honored repeatedly over the years with television's highest awards, Rogers even has his own star on Hollywood's Walk of Fame. One of his cardigan sweaters hangs in the Smithsonian. He stopped taping new episodes a year and a half ago, but Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood will continue in reruns with the message that has proved timeless. Chris Clackham, 7 News.
We begin today with the Rhode Island nightclub fire.
My investigators are now focused
To the weather now, and the welcomed him into our homes for years, wearing his trademark cardigan and changing his sneakers. Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, died early this morning of stomach cancer.
So let's make the most of this beautiful day. Since we're together, we might as well.
He produced and hosted Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood on PBS from 1968 to 2000, asking children everywhere to be his neighbor. Mr. Rogers was considered a TV pioneer, but in a television interview once, he said he didn't consider him a TV star, just a neighbor who came in for a visit. Fred Rogers was 74 years old. We'll be right back.
Could you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? Won't you please? Won't you please? Please won't you be my neighbor? My neighbor?
Vermont's Count On. This is News Center 5.
And now at 5, the terror alert that put missile launchers on standby has been eased. The death toll in the Rhode Island nightclub tragedy has been reduced, the latest on the investigation. And also today.
Please won't you be my neighbor? My neighbor.
An icon of children's television has died. Tonight, remembering the life of Fred Rogers. Good afternoon. Today, the Department of Homeland Security lowered the national terror alert status.
His neighborhood was the safest of havens where children were surrounded by love, cared for by a nurturing neighbor. Well, today, the joy in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood is tempered with tears. Fred Rogers, a pioneer in children's television, has died of stomach cancer. Reporter Susan Copen has the story from Fred Rogers' hometown of Pittsburgh.
It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor.
Through 50 years on television, Fred Rogers left an indelible mark on the lives of children and families.
Fred was one of the most caring people I've ever known. He was the best friend a person could have because he was there when he was needed.
Queen Sarah and Lady Evelyn, I presume?
Correct, as usual, Uncle Friday.
At public television station WQED in Pittsburgh, his world of make-believe came to life with his series, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
It's such a happy feeling, you're growing inside.
His former colleagues remember his sense of humor. David Newell, who played Mr. McFeely, recalls when Rogers went to surprise the man who poked fun at him on Saturday Night Live, Eddie Murphy.
Fred got up, he knocked on the door, and the door opened, and there was Eddie, and he backed up like that. And he said, "The real Mr. Robinson," and gave Fred a big hug.
His trademark sweater and sneakers are as famous as his name. In fact, the sweater worn by Mr. Rogers is now on display at the Smithsonian. Some of the more than 900 episodes of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood are still airing.
His was an extraordinary example of a life well lived.
Fred Rogers was a pioneer of the small screen who played a big role in the lives of children everywhere.
Please won't you be my neighbor? My neighbor.
Fred
Fred Rogers was diagnosed with stomach cancer in December. He said he never considered himself a TV star, just a neighbor who came by for a visit. In Pittsburgh, I'm Susan Copen, News Center 5.
Fred Rogers always taught young viewers that death should be something to talk about. And the producers of the Rogers television program want parents not to shy away from the questions that children have about his death. If you'd like more information on how to speak with your children about death,